Morning, everyone. Today I'll be talking to you about the physiology of resistance training. My name is Jordan, and I'm looking forward to sharing some insights into how resistance training affects our muscles and overall physiology. So, what is resistance training? It's defined as any exercise that causes the muscles to contract against an external resistance with the expectation of increases in strength, power, hypertrophy, and/or endurance. So, we know that exercise promotes skeletal muscle adaptations, um, but for specific types of trainings. So, for example, with resistance training, you want to do high load, high weight for low repetitions. And the result that you'll see is that over time, you will see an increase in muscle size, hypertrophy, and strength. So, why is it important? So, when we begin to start a exercise routine and get into a good habit of resistance training, our muscles will adapt to the changes in their environment. For example, there would be increased cross-sectional area of the muscle, selective hypertrophy of fast twitch fibers, decreased or maintained mitochondrial number, and capillary density of muscle, as well as possible changes in energy sources. Um, so, like I said, it's crucial for muscle adaptation because it stimulates protein synthesis through mechanical stress and the mTOR pathway. Factors such as exercise-induced muscle damage, training variables, nutritional support, hormonal environment, and individual factors all play a role. So with muscle protein synthesis, um, as I said in the last slide, there are specific variables and things that lead to muscles making more proteins. Um, those are mechanical stress, the mTOR pathway action, exercise-induced muscle damage, and more factors like training variables, nutritional support, hormonal environment, and individual factors based on the individual because everyone is different and everyone has different capabilities and different adaptations to specific exercise intensities. So, how does it affect your nervous system? Some benefits are that you'll see an increased neural drive, improved motor unit recruitment, and improved synaptic efficiency. If you're training near or at maximum levels of output, such as VO2 max, you're generating fatigue in the central nervous system, which temporarily reduces central drive the, and thus strength levels. So, hypertrophy, we've all heard about it. It's what the bodybuilders want. It's it's all about the cosmetic side of resistance training. These are guys that are huge, they're bulky. Um, so there are three mechanisms behind hypertrophy. One is mechanical tension, two is muscle damage, and the third is metabolic stress. So primary stimulus for muscle hypertrophy is mechanical tension. It's the force that's placed on a muscle during resistance training. It's generated when the tightened molecules inside muscle fibers stretch, and the resistance to that stretch produces tension. Mechanical tension activates anabolic pathways in muscle cells, which leads to protein synthesis and muscle growth. To create high mechanical tension, You can use high loads and perform many sets with 1 to 5 repetitions. Second mechanism of hypertrophy is muscle damage. Now, there's a lot of controversy about this one, and recent research has said that muscle damage might actually be negatively impacting your gains or hypertrophy in scientific terms for the nerds. Um, but the definition of muscle damage is that um, when we do resistance training, it creates an overload and causes our muscles to tear as a result of the inflammatory response. So it's basically just your body um, fighting back to that overload and that stress that you put on your muscle. So the third mechanism of hypertrophy is metabolic stress. So this will happen when muscles are overworked and they don't receive enough oxygen, and they're put in an anaerobic state. This causes a buildup of metabolites like lactate and hydrogen ions. And like we learned in beginning of class, hydrogen, more hydrogen means the muscle is more acidic. So think lactate, lactic acid. The more hydrogen, the more acidic. Less hydrogen, more basic. So when we exercise, and we reach that lactate threshold, there's a large buildup of lactic acid, um, and this creates acidity in the muscles, putting stress on them. All right. So another thing change that you'll see with resistance training is oxidative capacity and capillary count. So that won't be it'll be pretty minimal change in oxidative capacity, but the real gains you'll see is an increase in mitochondrial and capillary density. So um, not only will you have more mitochondria and capillaries in general, but you'll have more per capita in your muscles. So they'll be very dense in mitochondria, which we all know is a powerhouse of the cell. So you can all infer that a lot of mitochondria in a cell will lead to more output. Um, Another factor is depressed protein synthesis. So this is the state where the body's ability to synthesize new proteins is reduced. This can occur when the balance between muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein breakdown shifts unfavorably, causing impaired muscle growth or even muscle loss over time. It is a dominant characteristic of muscle. So during my research for this project, I found this pretty interesting book, exercise physiology book, that talked about muscle fiber length theory and how our knowledge has changed over time. So, to quote the book, it said some fibers appear to be quite long, up to 20 centimeters. However, the exact nature of a functional versus an anatomical muscle fiber is controversial. Researchers have found fibers typically to be about 2 centimeters in length. So, this is in contrast to 20 centimeter length that we previously believed to be true. Um, Previous studies suggesting that fibers may be quite long did not use specific techniques for identifying connective tissue intercepts. Thus, muscle fibers are likely to be in the range of 1 to 3 centimeters in length. So this comes from the same book, but it's about research on connective tissue. So connective tissue regulates the neuromuscular junction that we know so much about. It stimulates the development of synaptic folds and the incorporation of acetylcholine receptors into the sarcolemma. It also guides regenerating axons to the site of the original neuromuscular junction. It can provide signal for the development of specialized motor end plate structures, and it terminates the synaptic transmission through the usage of acetylcholine esterase, which is enzyme, looks like Pac-Man, and this is the acetylcholine, these dots, and it will eat these, um, to use layman's terms. And that once this acetylcholinesterase Pac-Man comes through and gets rid of all of this, then the contraction will stop. Okay, so on a more macro scale, there's the mechanisms of movement. So specifically the agonist versus antagonist muscles. Um, the agonist muscle is the primary muscle contracting to produce a movement. So for example, when you're doing a bicep curl, it's the bicep itself is the agonist in the curl because it's the one contracting. On the other hand, the antagonist is the one that's flexing. So it's extending. It's not the one that's primarily being used in that exercise. But if you were doing an exercise such as a tricep pull down, it's the complete opposite. So the bicep would become the antagonist and the tricep is the agonist because it's responsible for the primary muscle contraction. Okay, so protein supplementation is become a very pop culture thing in recent like gym culture and stuff like that. And everyone wants their fancy protein powder that has all types of flavors and everything. But at the end of the day, most of them are just made of some kind of whey protein and essential amino acids like BCAAs for recovery and stuff like that. Um, and it's very helpful. It's very useful. Um, so in particular, leucine supplementation can enhance muscle protein synthesis, particularly in lower protein meals. Consistent protein intake with adequate leucine is crucial for maximizing the benefits of resistance training. So if you're going to buy some kind of supplement, see if it has leucine in it because it's very helpful towards maximizing the benefits of the training that you're doing, and you don't want to miss out on any of those because you're working hard for them. Um, so the synergy with muscle protein synthesis is that the leucine enhances the anabolic effects of proteins. Um, and with recovery and performance, both leucine and protein support faster muscle recovery and greater strength gains in resistance training. So the key takeaway here is that consistent protein intake with adequate leucine is crucial for maximizing the benefits of resistance training. So another type of resistance training we can do is blood flow restricted training. It can enhance muscle growth with lighter loads. Practical applications for athletes are injury prevention and maintenance, as well as individuals with chronic conditions. So, like in this picture, she's using resistance bands. These are less stress on the body. We're not looking for hypertrophy here. This is just more like a therapeutic therapeutic and recovery focused exercise. So, practical application of resistance training. Um, we talked about all the stuff for the nerds. What's going on the small level. Um, but why do we need to know this? So, for example, if you're an athlete, it's important for injury prevention and maintenance. So, when you participate in regular strength training, you will have stronger muscles, tendons, and ligaments, reducing the risk of sports injuries by stabilizing joints and improving biomechanics. Um, if you're on the rehab side of things, uh, say you are coming back from a accident like a car crash, or you are an elderly person who struggles with just general movement, you can use this and apply it for rehabilitation. So, for individuals with chronic conditions, we want to focus on restoring functional movement patterns and minimizing compensations. Um, so these are like this is like for physical therapists. For sports medicine physicians, we can develop evidence-based resistance training programs that consider injury history, medical conditions, and sport-specific needs to maximize outcomes for whoever is going through this training. So, detraining consequences. What happens if you're really good about going to the gym, you got your bulk, um, you hit some PRs on bench, and then all of a sudden something happens in your life and you stop going to the gym. First thing we'll notice is muscle atrophy, um, which is basically just the opposite of hypertrophy. It's a decrease in muscle size. So just like riding a bike or anything like that, playing an instrument, if you do it a lot, you practice it, you'll be good. But once you stop doing that, your body adapts to the change and no longer um, can supplement that that muscle, so it starts to degrade over time. Um, It can also lead to changes in muscle memory dynamics, and if we identify risk factors, then we can mitigate these effects in advance. All right, you guys can see the answers, but don't look. Okay, so what is the primary adaptation in muscle fibers due to resistance training? The answer would be hypertrophy of type 1 and type 2 fibers. Define hypertrophy and hyperplasia. Hypertrophy is an increase in fiber size. Hyperplasia is the increase in the number of fibers. What is the role of protein supplementation in muscle growth? Enhances muscle protein synthesis post exercise. So you want to be taking the protein supplementation after exercise. That's when it's the most useful. Um, how does resistance training affect a neural drive? It will increase motor unit recruitment and synchronization. Okay, and what are the benefits of blood flow restricted training? This will enhance muscle growth with lighter loads. And here are our references. And thanks for listening.